Hello, and welcome to the presentation on communication. We've discussed critical thinking, creativity, collaboration, and now we will discuss communication. The C that we are not discussing in 655 is cultural competence, but that is one of the 5 C's for the 21st century. So, communication is important in all industries, but most importantly in the service industry. And up until the late 1900s, communication was not that critical across the fields. Why? Because individuals either worked with their hands, worked in silos, or were given instructions upon which to follow. But there was little collaboration, little critical thinking, which required collaboration and bouncing ideas off of others. But in industries today, we no longer need people to do things with just their hands. We've got robots to do that. And so, what is required is deep thinking, critical thinking, and that thinking has to be communicated to others. In the service industry, hospitality, the medical profession, the restaurant profession, other areas of service, individuals really must know how to not only communicate verbally, but to take cues from how things are said, to take cues from body language and also facial expressions. And if communication is not tight in an area of the service industry, that particular company can essentially go out of business. So, communication requires creating focus, a focus around what you want to communicate or convey, creating some energy around that information, and passion should also be included in all forms of communication. Why should we be interested in this? Why is this important? And so we need to have some passion around what we are communicating. And then when we can communicate through explanation, negotiation, through empathy, showing how we understand and can look at things through the lens of others. It should always be courteous. And then there are other forms of intense human interaction that goes into that. We talked about some of those. Again, I'll mention them. Facial expressions, the way we say things, the tone of the voice, the nuances in languages, and then also body language. So the ability to effectively, and communication also includes the ability to effectively utilize the 7 communication skills. I'm going to just list the 7 communication skills in a minute, but before I do so, I'd like you to click here and then click on the video. It's a 3-minute video on communication. So in the video, we learned about, got some more information around the 7 C's of communication. Those being clear, concise, concrete, correct, coherent, complete, and courteous. One of the areas that we are grappling with as a society, and one of your teams might select for their DT process, is campaigning for biliteracy. I think the United States is one of the few countries in the world where the majority of the population is monolingual. If we look anywhere outside of this country, individuals speak at least 2 languages. In many cases, it's 3, it's 4. If we go to the European continent, it's generally 3. If we dip down to Africa, including the Middle East, the greater part of Africa, Southern Africa, individuals speak many languages. If we dip down to the Latin America, South America, and even north of us in Canada, the Americas outside of the United States, individuals speak at least 2 languages. And in a global flat world, the more languages you speak, the better off you are. Why? Because you're not just going to be speaking to the head, but also to the heart. So, the linguistics and cultural skills, being able to speak a language is extremely important in business, multiple languages. If I can pick two individuals who have the same skills, but one speaks more than one language or one language more than the other, why wouldn't I choose the individual that can speak the multiple languages? And then in the service economy, the same. But not only is the linguistic piece important, but the cultural skills is equally important. And that is understanding the nuances of cultures, feeling comfortable in various cultures, and being able to interact with individuals. And the funny thing is, even if you speak the language, but you don't respect the culture, you're not going to get anywhere. On the other hand, if you don't speak the language, but you respect the culture, you can go much further. So, what are we doing with our kids to ensure that they are not only multi-literate, but multicultural? When we think about technology, we think mostly about the written, the spoken, and the other components that I've mentioned, but there's also communicating through technology. So we know about Skype, Twitter, Instagram for our students, and even for adults now. Instagram is big. Twitter is huge across the age spectrums. Facebook, the same. YouTube, QQ, and now the biggie is WeChat. And so WeChat has really revolutionized how we communicate in the electronic age. And that communication, again, means that we have to understand culture more than we even understand language, because we're going to be picking up on the facial expressions and the body movements of individuals engaged in the communication skills via these technology platforms. Now, though, let's think about teachers and technology. Those of you in the program are ahead of your colleagues, and some of you may know other teachers who really are afraid of technology. But what do we have? We have students who are digital natives. They are able to use a plethora of digital communication tools. But we, as the adults, as the teachers, in many cases, may be unfamiliar with these, uncomfortable with these technologies. And so, how do we come up to speed? How do you assist your colleagues in coming up to speed with technology and ensuring that what we do in the classroom engages students? When they get to the classroom, we don't want it to be powering down, as I've heard one student say. We want them to power up. So, how do we engage them in their world? And that includes bringing technology into the table, but not just technology for technology's sake, but how do we bring it in such that it enhances the learning, it enhances what we are trying to communicate. So, students can develop communication skills by developing proficiency with communication tools of technology, building relationship with others to pose and solve problems collaboratively and cross-culturally, having opportunities to communicate with other students across the globe. And again, we've got so many different platforms to make that happen. I say throw out Skype, go with WeChat. You've got Google Hangout, but if you are communicating with students from China, Google may not work, but WeChat certainly will. Designing and sharing information for global communities requires kids, again, to have those platforms that they need to communicate. Managing, analyzing, and synthesizing multiple streams of simultaneous information is something that kids must be able to do in order to communicate well. They've got so much information coming at them as we do, but for students, it's coming at a much faster pace than we ever had it as students ourselves. So, how do we manage that information? How do we analyze it? And then take all that information and make sense out of it coming from multiple streams, again, so that we can communicate it to others. Uh, Creating, critiquing, analyzing, and evaluating multiple media texts is part of being able to manage and analyze information. So, for our teachers again, examples for building communication skills can be found in the National Education Association, An Educator's Guide to the Four C's. And an example from the guide is in a 7th grade world language lesson. Students work in small groups and communicate with a Peace Corps volunteer, community activist, or a local leader in the target languages. And in this particular case, the students are in a bilingual program, but they don't necessarily have to be in order to engage in this type of communication. And they can engage in the communication for a number of different reasons. Here, students exchange information about projects relevant to them and the individual. So, how are we engaging kids, not just with other students, but with experts around the world? Obviously, we have to provide them with safe platforms to do so, but what are those opportunities that they have? Design thinking certainly is a way to get them communicating with individuals across the globe. All right, so that wraps it up for the communication presentation. Here is another little video that you can watch on communication.